My name is Marcus. I flew regional routes for 11 years out of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Before that, I flew cargo. Before that, I trained on a Cessna 172 at a small field in Cartersville, Georgia, where the runway lights went dark at 10 p.m. and you were expected to be on the ground before that. I got my instrument rating at 23, my commercial certificate at 25. I built hours the way most low-time pilots do, flying freight and turboprops at 2 in the morning over rural Tennessee and Mississippi, hauling envelopes and medical supplies to cities that weren't worth a mainline stop. Aviation makes you precise. That's the job. You learn to read instruments, not feelings. When an altimeter tells you something, you don't argue with it. When an approach plate shows terrain at 4,000 feet and you're at 3,800, you climb. You don't wonder, you don't hesitate, you act on information. The numbers either add up or they don't. If something is wrong, there's a reason. A blocked pitot tube, a failed static port, ice on the control surfaces, icing, wake turbulence, microbursts. There are names for everything that can kill you. There are checklists, there are procedures. The aviation world is built on the assumption that if something goes wrong, you can trace it back to a cause. That assumption holds most of the time. Pilots talk the same way mechanics talk, quietly, in specifics. You hear things in crew lounges that never make it into official reports. A captain who flew a red-eye out of Phoenix once told me there are things you log and things you don't. Not because you're hiding something, because there's no checkbox for what he saw over the Mojave at 4 a.m., and the FAA doesn't have a form for it. I understand that now. There are 5 things from my 11 years that I can describe exactly, in detail, in order. I've gone over each one more times than I can count. I've tried to explain them. I've applied everything I know about aircraft systems, atmospheric conditions, human fatigue, and the way the brain misfires after a long overnight. None of it accounts for what I saw. This happened on a cargo run out of Gainesville Regional, Florida. It was 11:47 p.m. I was flying a Cessna 208 Caravan solo, repositioning a small freight load down to Orlando Executive Airport. The sky had gone instrument meteorological conditions around Ocala. A low overcast had moved in from the Gulf. I was in the clouds at 4,000 feet, working the approach into ORL on autopilot, monitoring 121.5 megahertz on my second radio the way you're supposed to. 121.5 is the guard frequency, the emergency channel. No one uses it for routine communication. When something is on it, you listen. I was descending through 1,500 feet on the approach when I heard it. A voice, young, female, very quiet. Hello, hello. Not a distress call, not a mayday, just the words said twice like someone holding a radio and hoping someone was on the other end. I keyed my mic and responded on 121.5, gave my aircraft type and position, and asked if the station needed assistance. Silence. I waited. The ILS needles were steady. I continued the approach. The voice came again about 40 seconds later. The same word, same soft tone. Not panicked, almost questioning, like she wasn't sure the radio was working. Hello. I tried twice more. Nothing came back. I landed without incident, taxied to the cargo ramp, and shut down. Before I finished my paperwork, I called the tower and asked if they had any record of traffic on 121.5 in the last 20 minutes. The controller checked. He came back after a moment. Nothing logged. No calls, no intercepts, nothing from any other aircraft in the area. I filed my trip sheet and drove to the hotel. 2 days later, back in Atlanta, I was reading the regional aviation news brief we got circulated through the crew room. One item was 3 lines long. A 19-year-old student pilot in the Orlando area had taken a Piper Cherokee from a flight school without authorization the previous week. She had no instrument rating. She flew into clouds northwest of the field. The aircraft impacted terrain. She did not survive. Investigators later confirmed she had been transmitting on the emergency frequency. Her voice had been heard by at least one other aircraft during the final minutes of the flight. I sat with that for a while. The timing wasn't exact. It didn't have to be. I know what I heard on that approach. I know there was no aircraft in the area. I know the tower had nothing logged. I still fly the 121.5 frequency every flight. I listen to it differently now. I always respond when I hear something, even if nothing comes back. I was flying right seat on a CRJ 200 out of Atlanta to Greenville, Spartanburg. 44-seat regional jet. It was a Tuesday evening bank departure. The flight was light, 22 passengers. We pushed back at 9:18 p.m. 40 minutes into the flight attendant called the cockpit. Her name was Deshandra. She'd been flying for 6 years. Calm, professional. Not someone who called up front unless there was a reason. I've got a woman in 14E who says the person next to her keeps looking at her, she said. She's pretty shaken. Is 14F occupied? I asked. There was a brief pause. No, she said. 14F is empty. Has been since boarding. I told her to check on the woman and get back to me. She called again 8 minutes later. The passenger in 14E says someone was definitely sitting there. She described him, middle-aged man, dark blazer. She said he didn't say anything, just sat looking at the window. Is there anyone in that row now? I asked. No, I checked myself. 14E and 14F are both empty now. The woman moved herself to 12A. We landed without further incident. The woman in 12A had to be helped off the aircraft. She wasn't hysterical. She was just very still. She kept saying she wasn't imagining it. I didn't put any of it in my report. There was nothing to report. 3 weeks later, the same tail number, our N831CA, came up in my next Atlanta pairing. Before I pre-flighted, I checked the aircraft maintenance logbook the way you always do. I was scanning for write-ups, deferred items, any open issues. Near the back, under passenger notes from the previous month, was a single entry, medical event. Row 14F, passenger unresponsive during flight. Emergency services met aircraft on arrival. DOA. The date was 14 days before our Greenville flight. I didn't tell Deshandra. I didn't know what I would say. I still don't. What I know is that a woman in 14E saw someone sitting next to her, that a flight attendant with 6 years of experience took her seriously enough to call the cockpit twice, and that 14 days earlier, a man had died in that exact seat. I requested a different tail number for my next pairing. I didn't explain why. This one is documented, sort of. We were on approach into Cincinnati/Northern Kentucky International Airport. It was 2:31 a.m., a repositioning flight, just crew. I was flying left seat. My first officer was a guy named Keith who had come up through the same freight operation I had. 900 hours, solid instrument scan, not someone who embellished things. We were descending through 8,000 feet when Keith said, "Hey, look at your FMS screen." The flight management system screen is where you input your route, approach procedures, arrival fixes. It's a green on black display, numbers and waypoints. Nothing else except right then it showed text, not coordinates, not about an approach procedure, or text. It read, "Don't you wish you knew what this means?" The coordinates on the screen were nothing like what was written on our charts. Instead of map coordinates and approach info, there was a cryptic message. I read it twice. Keith read it out loud, quietly, the way you read something you're not sure you're reading correctly. We stared at it for 11 seconds. I counted later, watching the cockpit video from the CVR download we requested. Then the screen cleared. The approach data reloaded. Everything normal. ILS to runway 18C, exactly what we had briefed. We flew the approach. We landed. We filed an aviation safety report. That night, maintenance pulled the FMS unit. They found no fault codes, no corrupted data, no log of the message displaying. The system showed a normal, uninterrupted operating history. The CVR video confirmed we had both looked at the screen at the same moment. It confirmed our reactions, but the camera angle didn't capture the screen itself clearly enough to make out the text. The ASR is still in the system. I checked 2 years later. The written description of the message is there. The maintenance response says, "No anomaly found, unit operating within normal parameters." A similar case was later reported by another pilot at Newark, adding an eerie twist to what we'd seen. Different aircraft, different carrier, Same message structure, same spacing of the repeated letters. I don't know what generated it. I don't know what it means. I know Keith and I both saw it and that neither of us talked about it at the hotel that night. We ordered food and watched television and didn't mention it. Some things you process by not processing them. This one took me the longest to make sense of. I'm not sure I have. I was deadheading, riding as a passenger from Atlanta to Charlotte on a Tuesday morning in March, empty positioning flight. The cabin had maybe 10 people in it. I sat in the cockpit jump seat for the pushback and taxi, then moved to the cabin for the flight itself. There was a man sitting in 1A. He was wearing a pilot's uniform, full 4 stripes on the epaulets. The jacket was dark navy, cut in an older style, wider lapels than we wear now. On his left shoulder was a patch I didn't recognize at first glance, an orange and blue color scheme. I thought he was a deadheading captain from another carrier. He didn't acknowledge me when I sat across the aisle in 1B. He looked out the window at the ramp. His hands were folded in his lap. Still, somewhere over the South Carolina foothills, I leaned across the aisle to ask him which base he was out of. Conversation, something to do for a 38-minute flight. He didn't turn his head. He kept looking out the window. I figured he was tired or didn't want to talk. That's normal. When we started our descent, I went to the rear of the cabin to use the lavatory. Coming back, I passed the flight attendant, Maria, near the galley. I asked her if the pilot up front needed a coffee. She looked at me with a specific expression. Careful, neutral. There's no one in 1A, she said. I told her there was. I described him, the uniform, the patch. She shook her head. She said she'd done the boarding count herself. Row 1 was empty on departure. I walked back to the front. 1A was empty. The seatbelt lay flat across the cushion, unbuckled. The window shade was up. We landed at Charlotte without incident. That evening at the hotel, I sat with my laptop and searched for pilot uniforms with orange and blue shoulder patches. I went through regional carriers, charter companies, historical airlines. I found it on the 4th search. Eastern Airlines. The patch matched the uniform style worn by their cockpit crews in the early 1970s. I kept searching. After the crash of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 in December 1972, crew members and passengers on other aircraft began reporting encounters with the deceased crew, figures that appeared solid, real, and present before vanishing without explanation. I am not someone who believes in those kinds of stories. I looked at the photos of the Flight 401 crew for a long time that night. I'm not going to say who I think I saw. What I'll say is this. The maintenance log for that aircraft showed a write-up submitted that evening by the arriving crew. Number 3 engine, irregular oil pressure fluctuation during descent. Cause under investigation. The engine was inspected. Nothing was found. The write-up was cleared as an unrepeatable anomaly. I don't know what was sitting in 1A, but I know that on every flight I ever worked on after then, I always checked the number 3 engine oil pressure myself during pre-flight. Every single time. I never missed it. The last one happened on a cargo run. Atlanta to Memphis to Kansas City to Denver. A Tuesday overnight, early February. I was flying a Beechcraft 1900 for a small freight contract. My co-pilot was a kid named Andre, 26 years old, building multi-engine time before moving to a regional carrier. We were at flight level 330 over eastern Tennessee, somewhere between Chattanooga and Nashville, at 3:14 a.m. The sky was clear. Moon was up. The stars were sharp the way they only get in winter at altitude. Andre saw it first. "What's that off the left wing?" he said. I looked. A light. White, slightly blue at the edges, approximately our altitude. Moving at the same speed and in the same direction we were flying. Roughly 3 miles off the left wingtip. I checked the TCAS display. Traffic Collision Avoidance System. It shows other aircraft within a set range. The display showed nothing. I called Memphis Center on 133.0, asked for traffic in our area at flight level 330. The controller checked. He came back. "Negative traffic in your vicinity. You're the only target we're painting at that altitude." I keyed the mic again and said we had a visual on something. White light, our altitude, left side tracking with us. He asked me to describe it. I did. He said he'd have a look. He came back 2 minutes later. Still no radar contact. The light stayed with us for 38 minutes. Andre timed it on his watch. We both watched it. It didn't oscillate. It didn't strobe. It held steady position off the left wing with no variation in relative bearing and no change in apparent size. It wasn't a star. Stars don't maintain a fixed bearing on a moving aircraft. It wasn't another aircraft, and nothing showed on TC, AS, or ATC radar. At 3:52 a.m., somewhere west of Nashville, it was gone. No acceleration, no turn. One moment it was there, and the next time either of us looked over, the sky off the left wing was empty. We landed in Memphis 20 minutes later. I filed a PIREP, a pilot report, documenting the sighting, the time, the duration, and the negative TCAS and radar response. I filled it out carefully, the way I was trained. I gave the times, the altitudes, the frequency I'd used to contact Memphis Center, and the controller's name. When the PIREP was processed and sent back to me as a record, the description field, the section where I had written out exactly what we saw, was blank. Not redacted, not marked classified, just blank. Every printed copy I pulled was the same. The timestamp was there, the route was there, my certificate number was there. The description was blank. Andre still has his handwritten notes from that night. He'd been keeping a flight log in a spiral notebook. The entry is there in his handwriting, ink, dated, specific. Nobody has ever asked us about it. I stopped flying commercially 14 months after that night. The reasons I give people are practical. The pay at regionals, the hours, the upgrade times, all of it true, none of it complete. My certificates are still current. I could pass a medical tomorrow. But some mornings when I think about going back, I think about a young girl's voice on an empty frequency. I think about a man in an Eastern Airlines uniform sitting in a seat that the manifest said was empty. I think about a message on a flight management screen that maintenance said never happened. And I think about 38 minutes of a light holding steady off the left wing with nothing on the radar and nothing in the sky. I put the phone down and find something else to do. My logbook sits in a drawer in my office. 11 years, 6,400 hours. Every flight I ever completed is in there, documented. Dates, routes, aircraft, times. There are 5 nights I can find in those pages that I've never been able to explain. Not with instruments, not with checklists, not with anything I learned in 11 years of flying. Aviation gives you a framework, cause and effect, procedures and outcomes. Every anomaly has a source. Every failure has a root, except for the ones that don't. And up there at 3 in the morning, 33,000 feet above a darkened sleeping country, the ones that don't fit the framework feel a lot closer than they do on the ground.